A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Royal Aeronautical Society Heathrow Branch webinar. My name is Ellie McBrien. I'm a member of the Heathrow Branch Committee and the moderator for today's session. Today, we're delighted to welcome some excellent speakers for this special webinar, celebrating some of the achievements of women in our industry. This evening, we have Captain Emma Henderson, ex-EasyJet captain and co-founder of Project Wingman. We have Paula Stannett, Chief People Officer of Heathrow, and also Catherine Leahy, Director of Airport Operations at Heathrow. Also joining us, we have our branch chairman, Peter Fry, who will be chairing today's webinar. Before I hand over to Peter for an introduction to the event, there are a few housekeeping points that I would like to make. First of all, please feel free to share your thoughts about today's event on social media channels, such as Twitter, by using @RAeSLHR and using the hashtag RAeSLHR events to interact with us. Your microphone is on mute, but throughout the webinar, we do encourage you to use the Q&A panel to raise any questions that you may have, and also to interact with us by clicking the thumbs up or like button next to each of the questions that are being published. Finally, I would like to make you aware that we will not be issuing any CPD certificates for today's event. The session is being recorded and will be made available via our podcast and YouTube channel post-event. Without further ado, let me hand over to Peter.
Thanks, Ellie, for the welcome and the high-level introduction to today's event. Hello, I'm Pete Fryer, the Chair of the London Heathrow Branch of the Royal Aeronautical Society. I'm exceptionally pleased to be able to personally welcome all of our viewers, our Society members, branch members, guests of the branch, and anyone else personally to the London Heathrow Branch. This evening, we're pleased to present a very special event in the 2021-22 season of branch lectures to mark Women in History Month and the International Women's Day, which was just 2 days ago on Tuesday, the 8th of March. Equality in aviation is a huge issue for us in the Royal Aeronautical Society, both at main society level and here in the branches. I'm incredibly proud of the work being done by everyone in the Society's team, no matter their gender or racial background, in order to share the amazing and often unheard stories of all the people, women and men, working tirelessly to bring diversity and inclusion in aviation and inspire younger generations. International Women's Day is celebrated annually across the globe. It is an opportunity to recognise and celebrate the achievements of women in society and inspire the next generation of girls and young women to achieve their own goals. The first International Women's Day event was held in, I've lost my date, was held in 1911 in Austria, Denmark, Germany and Switzerland, and then it was held on the 19th of March. It was not until 1913 that the date of 8th of March was fixed after international discussions. The 8th of March in our Gregorian calendar is equivalent to the 23rd of February in the Orthodox calendar, which was when Orthodox women marked their first International Women's Day in 1913. Since then, the 8th of March has been celebrated as International Women's Day across the world, although it was only really in the last decade that it has gained further traction. While the 8th of March is International Women's Day across the world, it's also a very meaningful date for the aviatrix. The day also coincides with the anniversary of the world's first female pilot's licence. Being something of an aviation history enthusiast, in order to give you the facts, I got out my copy of the Guinness Book of Air Facts and Feats and found that, and I hope at this stage you have a slide on your screen. On the 8th of March 1910, Raymond Delaroche became the first woman to be issued with a pilot's licence, licence number 36 from the Aero Club de France. So who was this Raymond Delaroche? Born on the 22nd of August 1882 as Elise Raymond Delaroche, the young Frenchwoman was first an actress, using Raymond Delaroche as her stage name. Having been inspired by early French aviation pioneers, she took up flying in October 1909. The pioneer pilot and aircraft maker Charles Voisin taught Delaroche to fly at Chalon to the east of Paris. In a single-seat aeroplane of his design, Delaroche was given instruction on the ground, learning how to use the controls while taxiing before taking off for her first solo. That was her very first flight ever. Sadly, despite a successful short aviation career, including setting 2 women's altitude records and a women's distance record, her flying career was not going to progress smoothly, and several serious injuries delayed her progress. The arrival of World War I suspended Delaroche's flying career, as it was considered far too dangerous for women to fly. On the 18th of July 1919, Delaroche, whose next ambition was to become the first ever female test pilot, acting as one of 2 pilots on a new aircraft type, the aircraft entered a dive while on approach and crashed, killing both Delaroche and her fellow pilot. A statue commemorating Delaroche can be found at Paris Le Bourget Airport, just outside Paris. It has been over 100 years since the first woman was awarded a pilot's license, but we're still a long way from obtaining the equality for women in aviation that's deserved. Let's not leave it another 100 years before gender bias is totally eliminated. By looking at the success of some of today's women in aviation, this evening's Heathrow Branch event entitled Celebrating Women in Aviation is an opportunity to inspire the next generation of girls and young women to achieve their own goals in today and tomorrow's aviation and aerospace industry. Aviation is not beyond the expectation of young women. Our webinar this evening will be hosted and facilitated by our very own Eleanor McBride from the RAeS Heathrow Branch Committee. Ellie is a senior first officer with British Airways who studied aerospace engineering at the University of Manchester before accepting a place on the BA Future Pilot programme midway through her studies. Since 2016, she has flown the short-haul network on the Airbus A320 fleet out of Heathrow. As a pilot ambassador for British Airways, she provides an insight for young people wishing to make a career in the airline industry. Ellie has been an active member of the Heathrow Branch Committee since 2012 and enjoys working with our branch and the main society to encourage young people to follow their passion in aviation and aerospace. In support of Ellie this evening, we are delighted to be joined by a panel comprising 3 ladies who have really made it to the top. Captain Emma Henderson MBE is co-founder of Project Wingman, Paula Stannett, who is the Chief People Officer at Heathrow Airport, and Catherine Leahy, who is the Director of Operations at Heathrow. I will let Ellie tell you more and introduce her panel. Emma, Paul and Catherine, welcome to the Royal Aeronautical Society's Heathrow Branch. To all our audience, if you have any questions for Ellie and her panel, I encourage you to pose them through the Q&A window, which can be opened from the question mark button on the top bar. I am now very keen to pass you over to Eleanor, who will host and facilitate the forum Celebrating Women in Aviation.
Thank you, Peter. We really have come an awful long way since those days back in 1910, and we are delighted to see not only women as flight crew, also air traffic controllers, and also managing and operating our major airports across the country. I am now excited to be able to hand over to our presenters for tonight's main event. Our first speaker, as Pete said, is Captain Emma Henderson MBE. Emma co-founded Project Wingman during lockdown, her dedicated team of airline crew providing invaluable support to those NHS workers on the front line. She may also be a familiar face for those who watched ITV's Inside the Cockpit, where she, along with some of her colleagues, gave an insight into EasyJet's day-to-day operation. Welcome, Emma, and over to you.
Thank you, Ellie, for that warm welcome. I'm just going to see if I can get this presentation to share. While that's just winding itself up, as Ellie has said, I'm a former airline captain from EasyJet. Ellie, can you just confirm that you can see the slides on my screen? So as Peter said, very interesting that you raised Raymond Delaroche as being the first female pilot in 1910, licensed pilot, because actually, you know, 122 years later, it's quite staggering really that there are still only 5% of the world's pilots are females, and of the world's airline captains, only 1.42% are females as well. In fact, when I took command of an Airbus A320 in 2016, I was one of fewer than 500 female airline pilots in the world, airline captains, sorry, in the world, which makes me and my fellow female captains rarer than Bengal tigers. In fact, endangered Bengal tigers. In fact, there are 4 times as many endangered Bengal tigers in the world as there are female airline captains, although we're not being hunted to extinction yet. So I don't come from a flying family, but I did grow up with a love of flying. And this was really started when in 1983, 10-year-old me was taken to Stansted to see USS Enterprise come in, which was flown in on the back of a 747. It flew around the world to show everybody what a space shuttle looked like. And 10-year-old me, this is actually one of my photos from that day, said, that's it, I am going to be an astronaut, and that's what I need to do as soon as possible. And I still have the enormous poster of the space shuttle taking off that was on my bedroom wall till I moved out in my 20s. I still have that as a very prized possession. Enterprise actually didn't go into space, and neither in fact did I. I went to university. I did have a flying lesson for my 18th birthday, but without funds to be able to finance pilot training, I went to university to do a history degree with a view to becoming a corporate lawyer. I wanted to be a hotshot corporate lawyer in the City of London with a big office and a big high-rise building, and I didn't want to be doing houses and divorces and things like that. That was where my sights were set. But when I was walking through Freshers' Fair at Leeds, where I studied, I saw a big sign saying "Learn to fly for free." So I went over to find out what that was all about, and discovered the University Air Squadron. I joined the Yorkshire University Air Squadron in the 1994, well, it was 1994 intake, as one of only 2 girls joining the squadron that year. And it was actually only the second year that girls had been allowed to join the University Air Squadron, let alone the Royal Air Force itself. I spent the next 2 years learning to fly in a Bulldog, in a bone dome and flying suit, which was ridiculously overdressed, frankly, but a lot of fun. And I actually went to Cranwell to do aptitude tests and got marginal for pilot and exceptional for navigator. And I just thought, I don't want to be a navigator, I want to be a pilot. So by that time, I'd also met a navigator at the nav training school at RAeS Finningley, where we were flying. He's now been my husband for 27 years, and I married him 11 days after I left university, graduated from university. And we moved to the north of Scotland to RAF Kinloss, which is where I am now. And I really thought my flying days were over. There were no job prospects up here. I was English, and I was married to the Air Force, and there were not a lot of jobs available for people like me. So we had children, and we built a house and decided we would settle here for the rest of our lives. Now, anybody who's familiar with the Air Force will know that they always have other plans. And within a year of moving into our house, we found ourselves on a one-way flight to Auckland, New Zealand, where we spent the next 3.5 years on a diplomatic posting to the Royal New Zealand Air Force. And it was whilst here that I learned to fly for the second time around at the local flying club at Whanuapai, which is the home of Base Auckland. I spent 3.5 years actually having the time of my life flying around Auckland, obviously gaining my licenses. I flew down to Tauranga, flew my father-in-law actually down to a place called Tauranga. And this photo was taken on that trip, and it was significant for me because we flew down to visit a man who later on, he was to become a friend until he died. but this is a picture of me with Les Munro. He was the last remaining original Dambusters pilot, and I met him in 2004, and we became friends until he died in 2015. He was a fantastic man and a huge champion of female pilots. His granddaughter Emma is a pilot in Australia. So that was absolutely fantastic, and this was the sort of views that I experienced regularly from where I was flying from. That's Auckland, downtown Auckland, with the Sky Tower just on the right hand side there. I came back to the UK as a fully qualified commercial pilot with a multi-engine instrument rating, and we came back to High Wycombe, where I was awarded a scholarship from the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators to become a flight instructor. And I spent the next 3 years instructing at initially at Wycombe, and then we moved back to Kinloss, and I instructed at Kinloss itself, and then at Inverness, where I became the chief flying instructor of the Highland Aero Club. With views like this, which is looking back down the back end of a Tomahawk and down Loch Ness back towards Inverness, it's easy to see why I enjoyed that so much. But my sights were really set on the airlines. EasyJet had started operating in 1995 up from Aberdeen to from Luton to Aberdeen, and that had really opened up the UK for those of us that were living 600 miles away from our families. So I said if I ever did fly for an airline, it would be EasyJet that I would go to. And my chance came in 2009 when I got a course, a place on a type rating, and these were photos that were taken on the first day that we did our base training in Bravo Kilo. We went up to East Midlands and just flew round and round doing bumps, and it was quite amazing being able to operate in such a great big aircraft after all those hours flying in tiny little aircraft. I started off at Stansted. I was 37 years old, by the way, when I first got my first airline job. So my message to younger women particularly about getting into the airlines is you don't have to do it at 18. It's never too late. So I started off at Stansted and then moved to Luton and finally Gatwick, with time over Geneva, time out in Lyon. This was a photo coming back from Tallinn. This is the Frisian Islands coming back down from Tallinn at sunset. My office looked like this, which some of you will be familiar with. It's something I miss very much. We were ferried around on private jets to do rescue flights, you name it, we did it. And it was just a fantastic, 5 years at Stansted. And I was ready to go for command at the end of that, and was well through the command course, or the command process, when a little bit of a disaster struck, actually. So this was my sort of standard view coming back into Stansted. I got sick, basically. I got struck down with an illness that looked like it might be multiple sclerosis. 6 months of investigations it resulted in me losing my medical. I was grounded and I almost died. And my life was saved by a neurologist at Frimley Park Hospital, who recognised very quickly what was wrong, fixed me, and I recuperated back in Scotland before going back to work 6 months later and jumping back into the command course. I was quite desperate to become a captain, and I'd worked so hard. I didn't really have enough respect for my own health at that point, and I really jumped back into the command course too soon. I also jumped back into exercise too soon, and unfortunately, having cycled from initially I did the Palace to Palace bike ride from Buckingham Palace to Windsor Castle, and because that went okay, I thought it'd be okay to cycle from Waterloo in London to Waterloo in Belgium, which was a 300-mile bike ride with no training, and my back did not cope with that. So during my command course I failed, and I failed the final LOE sim check, and it was quite a crushing and humiliating blow for me, because I had to drive home at 2 o'clock in the morning to tell my family that I hadn't passed and I hadn't made it. And I questioned whether or not I should even stay in flying. Was it something that was meant for me or not? But you know, you have to just pick yourself up, dust yourself down and learn from your mistakes and own your mistakes, which I chose to do. And a year later, I'm very happy to say that I passed my command course with my final line check being in an aircraft that bore my initials of Echo Hotel, Emma Henderson, obviously. So that was a huge coincidence. There's no crewing team in the world that could make that happen. But and I spent the next 4 years really having the time of my life. I was captain of my own ship. I chose a leadership style that took people with me, and as well as doing all the normal stuff that's involved with flying a 200 passenger twin engined jet aircraft, I was a fear of flying presenter, helping people to get over their fear by talking to them on stage about why they're not going to die on an airplane, basically, and then taking them on flights to enable them to carry out the same sort of normal things that you and I do all the time on aircraft. So that was a huge privilege. There were other things I was involved with during my time as a captain as well. Ellie has very kindly already mentioned Inside the Cockpit, which was, I was asked if I would appear in this when I moved to Gatwick, and it was huge fun. We had these cameras that were screwed to the cowling of the flight deck for, I think I was filmed for about 16 flights, and I just absolutely loved every minute of it, I'm not going to lie. And it's a real privilege actually to have that as a memento of a career that I loved so much. I was also a peer support mentor, and it was my background in peer support really that allowed me to go on to do what I did next. However, my career, the doors closed really on my career. 16th of March 2020, I operated a flight to Luxembourg, and as you will all be very aware, the flights were empty. COVID was marching across the world like a tidal wave, and I operated this flight to Luxembourg, and it felt very significant for me coming back into runway 26 left in Gatwick that night. It felt like something big was happening, and was it just felt, I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it felt like this was a big moment. It turned out to be the biggest moment of my career because it was the last flight I ever operated, and I flew home the next day for my days off and never returned to Gatwick. I've never been back to Gatwick, and I've never been back to the flight deck either. While I was sitting at home, kind of wondering, like everybody else was, what was going to become of us, I was aware of the fact that aircrew could do something to help the NHS, as were other people in the airlines. And some of us got together and we founded Project Wingman, which is a charity that utilised the transferable skills of grounded aircrew to provide wellbeing support to frontline NHS staff. We really cobbled it together very quickly. 3 weeks after we had our first phone call, we opened our first lounge at the Whittington Hospital in London. And the idea was that uniformed crew would go into hospitals and literally provide simply tea and empathy to people who were just desperately needing it. So we set our first lounge up at the Whittington in London, and really it went like dominoes after that. Once one hospital decided they wanted us, others followed, until we had 104 lounges across the entire UK. We also had an incredible response from aircrew. Within 3 days, 700 people had signed up to help, and that number grew to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. We ended up with 6,500 aircrew volunteers on our database, and we still have most of them left actually. So we spread very quickly, and NHS Trust just welcomed us with open arms, and we were able to provide this support through partly the generosity actually of the British public and the vast quantities of chocolate they provided, but also other people who sponsored us. We've received to date £8 million worth of newspapers and magazines, for example, and luxury items from one of our founding sponsors. So it was just a very simple premise, and it meant a lot to the people who were on the receiving end of it, because just as an example, there was one situation where somebody came into one of our lounges and asked when we'd be flying again. And when the answer was, I don't know, then actually that staff member burst into tears and said, my mum's just died, I'm from overseas, I don't know when I can get home. They were going to miss the funeral. And one of our aircrew volunteers was able to spend 2 hours talking to that person about basically about everything that they were going through, and just giving them the support that they needed, which is an amazing thing to have happened. And the other thing, the other nice story that happened as well was that a friend of ours contacted me one day and said, my daughter works as a junior doctor in Birmingham. She cries on the way home every day because of what she's seeing. And today she laughed. And the difference was that she'd been into a wingman lounge. He actually called it the BA lounge, which I had to correct him. It's a wingman lounge. But the fact that they had been into the wingman lounge and received just a little bit of tender loving care, a warm blanket around the NHS that we were able to provide was a really proud moment for me. As people went back to work, as lockdowns started to be released and people started to go either into new jobs because they'd been made redundant or back into their airline jobs, we realised we needed to change shape. So we launched our Wingman Wheels campaign and bought a double-decker bus, which you see here, this will be our first double-decker bus, and that goes around the country providing the same support to hospitals that might previously not have had the space to be able to accommodate us. And it also allows us to be very flexible. Rather than making big demands on people's time all the time, we can do concentrated bursts of time in hospitals as the buses move around. It was joined by Wingby, our second bus, in July 2021. And we now have the two buses we actually own 4 buses, but 2 of them are converted and going around the country. And we're just working on converting the other buses as well to bring them into service because our work continues. And actually just tonight, I've taken a call to ask if we can provide support to aircrew who are operating rescue flights from Ukraine or from Poland with Ukrainian refugees on them. And that's something we're about to start getting involved in as well. So where there's a need, we will provide the support wherever we can. Our stats have been absolutely incredible. This was in 2020 when we had 5,000 aircrew. It's increased to 6,500 and pretty much stayed there. And this was just an idea of where the lounges we covered. We also, by the way, had 2 lounges in New York City for a brief time under the name of Project Wingman USA, which was amazing. Our first birthday, by then we'd served over 5 million cups of coffee and tea to NHS staff. And our bus, the first bus was launched at Homerton Hospital, and the BBC One show came and did a piece on us, which gave us some much needed publicity. And that was absolutely fantastic. And we were highly recognised by the airline industry and the NHS alike, and receiving awards for outstanding achievement. We were described as the only good thing to happen to aviation in 2020, which was amazing. And the last sort of the final accolade for me really was that in the January New Year's Honours List of 2021, I was made a member of the Order of the British Empire, or MBE, which is something that I have the title of, but not the medal yet. I have a scroll signed by Prince Philip and the Queen, which was the last one that he was signed before obviously he sadly passed away, and I'm going to collect my medal in May. So that medal has my name on it, but it belongs to the 6,500 crew who have given everything they had left to give in really dark moments to support people that were in need. And I'm incredibly proud not only of them and everybody that they've been able to support, but also I'm proud of the career that I have had, the opportunity to have, what it's given me and what it's allowed me to go on and do for other people. So I think that's hopefully just about the right timing for you, Ellie, and tell you a little bit about me. And I think I'll hand back to Ellie now.
Thank you so much, Emma. To say one part of your career is inspirational is something, but to go on and do so many different roles and be incredibly inspirational to flight crew like myself, looking ahead to hopefully one day go for my command, through to your selfless dedication that you did with Project Wingman. It really is truly something, and I'm sure many people in the audience will think so as well. Our next inspirational woman is Paula Stannett, the Chief People Officer at Heathrow. Paula has been working at Heathrow since 1999 and was appointed as Chief People Officer in 2013. Her previous roles at the UK's busiest airport have included HR Director for the Airports Division, HR Director for Corporate Services, and leading Heathrow's Winter Resilience Programme. So Paula, over to you.
Thank you, Ellie, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen so I can bring up our presentation for this evening. Here we go. So yes, good evening, and delighted to be here. Just want to tell you a little bit about me personally, first of all. So can I just check, Ellie, that you can see everything on the screen? Brilliant. Off we go. So, as well as loving people, I also have a big fan of animals. So I've got a dog and a couple of cats, a pony, 5 fish, and over my time I've probably had every single rodent you can possibly imagine. You didn't know this evening's conversation was going to go here, did you, everybody? But that's probably because I've got 2 amazing daughters who also love animals, and they are completely different. So just wanted to start with, there is a lot to be said for nature rather than nurture. Both of them are incredibly different. I've got Princess Ellie that you can see up on the screen. She has, since day one, always wanted to be a princess, wears raw princess clothes till she was 8. And now she's at university doing graphic design. She also does princess parties in her spare time, if you can believe it, and it's true. And then over on the other side, I've got gorgeous Millie, who would never wear a dress, never would. In fact, the only princess party she ever went to, she was a pirate. And she doesn't like wearing anything girly at all, and is much happier up the yard with her pony. And they are very, very different around what they want to do when they grow up. But as a mother, I want for my girls to have the very best and reach their full potential. And I want the same for every single person at Heathrow. So growing up for me, actually, I never knew what I wanted to do. So Emma, I was really impressed to hear you wanted to be an astronaut, because it's always heartened me for people who know what sense of direction they are going on. And I'm hoping on the call this evening, many people are interested in aviation, but I can be honest with you, I didn't have a clue. So what I've always done is play to my strengths and do what I enjoy, because I'm a great believer in when you find something easier or you find it more fun, life is more enjoyable and it helps you learn. So I chose to go to university and do communication studies, which was a bit of a mix between media, but also a lot of behavioural psychology. And whilst I was there, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And in fact, one of my lecturers said to me, well, you'll be really good in HR, but I wasn't convinced. So when I finished my degree, I got a graduate job actually at ASDA. And what I did was I joined a graduate scheme, which was a rotational graduate scheme. And what that enables you to do is to move around numerous different business areas so you can try them out. And I totally believe that you don't know what you don't know. And once you get to try a variety of different things over 3 to 6 months, you can see if that's something you can have a passion and a desire to do. So I really liked doing operational roles. And so I did that for a few years and then moved into people. And then in, as I said, 1999, Ellie mentioned, I moved to Heathrow. And that was because I got a call. And one of the things I wanted to share on the call this evening is I have actually never applied for a job over my 30-year career. And I would encourage every single person to do that, because probably one of my biggest limiters has always been confidence. And therefore I haven't put myself out there and had the self-belief to actually go for things. So I would really encourage everybody on the call to really have self-belief and to go for opportunities and not necessarily wait to be tapped on the shoulder and asked to consider them. I have, though, done many, many different jobs during my 30-year career, because it is important to grow. And if you're still studying, you will be very committed to learning. But careers are also about lifelong learning, and being curious and developing new skills is so important. And that's another top tip from me. We don't know what jobs are going to be available in 5-10 years. So it's really important that you get a varied understanding of what's happening and you grow and you change jobs as you go. So moving on to my next slide, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Heathrow, and hopefully you've all visited the UK's and used to be the world's busiest airport. It's an amazing place. It's the UK's busiest employment site. We used to have 76,500 people working at the airport, but sadly during the pandemic we now only have between 40 and 50,000. We have about 400 different companies, 80 plus airlines, and we all work together to make the magic of Heathrow every day, which is really exciting. And we also have probably every single job that there is at the airport, other than an astronaut. But we do have many fantastic aviation jobs. We have pilots, we have stewards, we have airfield jobs, from air marshalling. We've even got our very own fire service. We've got service jobs, security jobs. We've got every single engineering role you could think of, from mechanical, electrical, water, civil, and we've even got some VIP jobs where people can meet all the famous. So there's an amazing plethora of jobs. It's a very, very exciting place to be. People often think that the jobs are lower level, but we've got some really senior business roles at the airport, and people stay for 20, 30, 40, 50 years because they can move around and build their careers. So another few facts before I move on. We've got 2 runways, we've got 5 terminals, we've got 7,500 CCTV cameras. How exciting. 44 rail and road tunnels. And one of my favourite facts before the pandemic was we sold a bottle of Chanel every 3 minutes. So wow, what a place. But the thing I really love about Heathrow is it's not just about what we do, it's how we do it. And we're a very purposeful company. So we're all about making every journey better. We're all about being inclusive and allowing everybody to reach their full potential. We've got 6 fantastic values: keeping everyone safe, delivering excellent service, doing the right thing, treating people with respect, working together, and aiming high. And you can see from this picture here that there's so much colour and richness from the diversity of the people that we have, that we work hard on to make sure that everybody can reach their full potential. And that's really important to us as a business. So I'll tell you a little bit about my role as Chief People Officer. Well, no surprises. I didn't know that I would ever be a Chief People Officer. And when I look back, certainly I didn't even have any idea that one day I would be doing this amazing role at Heathrow. And it is a truly amazing job. I'm on the Heathrow Executive Company Director, so I get to run the airport with many of my colleagues, which means I do different things every day, often get to comment and contribute to things I'm not a specialist in, but it is so great to be able to making a difference for the Heathrows and airports. I look after our #1 business priority, which is Mojo, which is Heathrow being a great place to work, which means I get to build really exciting plans to make sure that we have the right colleague proposition for our workforce. COVID has been hard, and I look after health and safety. So making sure we've got the right management systems and the right approach to safety at Heathrow has been really important. We know that through COVID and the pandemic, there's been a massive impact on resilience and mental health and well-being. And that's been a real focus for us. We've seen a 40% increase in people needing help with anxiety, stress, and really just being able to understand where they are and how can they bounce back and use some tools that we provide and some services that we provide to really help them. So that's been a really big push that we've had. So some other things you do if you ever fancy being in HR or being a Chief People Officer, you get to recruit and make sure that you've got the wonderful talent at the airport. And I mentioned lots of different roles. It's a very exciting opportunity to be actually having those interviews and recruiting all the very, very best talent at the airport, exciting part of the job. And then you make sure that you're paying them the right money. So that's really important. I bet all of you on the call are thinking, I want a job that pays good money. But it's not just about money, it's around, do we get the right recognition? Do we get the right benefits? And are you rewarded in the right way for the job you're doing? And then once people are in the airport being paid the right amount, we also make sure that we're developing them for now and to tomorrow, making sure that they've got the right skills for the job. And for those really top talent in the business, we make sure that we move them around. And you'll be hearing from Catherine in a minute. She's one of our top talented female directors, and we make sure that we sponsor our top talent and give them the right skills so that they can get on the exec in the future. And I think really important to mention about Heathrow is we are a real internal talent promoter. So people join at entry level roles, and then all of our management and senior management roles, we open up to internal talent and we develop them so that they are ready to take that. And that, I think, makes us quite unique. We only bring people in externally when we don't have the talent for a particular skill set. So on average, we recruit internally about, for most, probably 70% plus of our jobs at Heathrow. So really exciting place to work. Now, I mentioned inclusion, equality and diversity. That's so important for us with our sustainability agenda. We make sure that we've got some really good networks that cover gender and also Black, Asian, minority ethnic cultures. We've got a proud network and we've got a disability network. So we're very keen to hear from people about how can we make things better in the workplace. And then finally, I thought I'd mention one of the positives of the pandemic, which has been agility and flexibility. So as soon as we started into the pandemic and our Prime Minister said to work from home, we quickly moved to hybrid working and have been able to do amazing things online. Clearly, for those operating the airport, and Catherine's one of them, they've had to come in, but for people that have been able to work from home, we've been able to really embrace that. And I think that's something that is here to stay, giving people much more flexibility and empowerment around how they actually do their roles, which I think is really exciting. So I just wanted to finish with mentioning a little bit about how you can join us, because I know many of you out there are doing engineering qualifications, you're doing degrees, or you're actually just thinking about what are the opportunities. And we've got some really exciting careers at Heathrow, really good opportunities. So one of the main routes into the business is for our security. We're currently looking for about 1,000 people to join us for summer, and that sounds quite a lot. So I'll give you a bit of context. We used to do 80 million passengers per annum, and then over the pandemic that's significantly reduced. Last year we did 19.4 million. This year we're doubling, so actually we're a growing business, so we need a lot of talent to come and join us in a variety of roles. One of the biggest areas is security officer. So if anybody's interested in doing that or knows somebody who is, then please get in touch. We've also got some really exciting opportunities for GCSE holders and also graduates. So we run an engineering apprenticeship, which you need to have a GCSEs for, and it's a 4-year apprenticeship. It's actually probably the route that 50% of our engineers come into, and we move them all around different areas, and you end up with a chartered engineering status and a really exciting role. So if you are interested in doing an engineering role that actually really adds value to the business and keeps it running, then this is the job for you. Or if you fancy doing a graduate role, we've got 4 different types. One is engineering for graduates. We've also got a finance engineering route and a construction route. And then, of course, the one that I did when I first joined ASDA, the rotational route, that really enables you to get to know a variety of different parts of the airport. So very exciting. Please get in touch with us at heathrow.com, or if you want to link in with me, then I'd be happy to hear from you and answer any questions. So Ellie, back to you.
Thank you so much, Paula. It's so wonderful to hear how you didn't know what you wanted to do when you were younger, which is more often the case these days of people going through school, even going through university, not quite wondering which industry or whereabouts they want to end up. So it's fantastic to see the heights that you can achieve even at that stage, and really not to panic, to have a look. I think the website's still on the screen, so hopefully, yeah, we'll get lots of people into Heathrow Airport. Our final speaker for tonight is Catherine Leahy. Catherine is Director of Operations at Heathrow Airport, where she holds functional responsibility for airside, baggage and airfield operations, as well as having an umbrella responsibility for the day-to-day management and operations of the Airport Operations Centre, Resilience and Emergency Planning. She is also a non-executive director at NATS. So without further ado, over to Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie, and hi everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I was contemplating what I was going to say earlier on today, and I've been thinking about it for a while. And I don't actually do a lot of public speaking because in my job I speak to the public every day, and when I'm out talking to passengers and I'm talking to stakeholders. So I often think that people probably hear enough of me, but I'm really pleased to be here this evening. It made my heart melt, I have to say, to see Emma's picture of Enterprise, because I can remember vividly standing as a 10-year-old. Emma and I realised yesterday when we were talking to each other for the first time we are the same age, and watching it from my primary school playground in the outskirts of Glasgow, and thinking at the time my grandfather had set up the engineering base for what is now British Airways at the now Glasgow Airport immediately after the Second World War. And my father features on minute 34 on When Britain Ruled the Skies. He was on the first shuttle from Glasgow to London as a young schoolboy in his school uniform. So in some way, aviation has been absolutely sort of I've grown up with it and it's been ground into me, and I've always loved travel. But if you were to ask 10-year-old me what did I want to be, I was going to be a butcher. I loved going to the butcher's on a Saturday morning to do my mum, my grandma's and my elderly next door neighbours, the Miss Lowe's, two spinster sisters who lived with each other. So I wanted to be a butcher. I didn't think for 1 minute I would ever be Director of Ops for Britain's busiest airport, but I'll come on to that and how that happened in a moment. Finishing university, I went to university in Glasgow. I did a degree in risk management, so my background is in aviation. It's kind of finance and operational and business risk. I speak 2 languages. I speak Italian and French. Although my Italian I would describe as beach Italian, because I have half Scottish, half Italian cousins, so it is probably more bad language than good language, so you wouldn't trust me in a work environment in it. But 21-year-old me, if you'd said to me then, what would you do? I didn't do any vocational or industry work during university. I went off and did Camp America for 3 summers in a row, and met some phenomenal people who I'm still friends with to this day. And at 21 years old, I was off for my 3rd year in succession down to the Florida Keys to scuba dive, windsurf and sail for the summer at a camp that taught marine biology to young children. And I'm very passionate about our sustainability and the ecology and maritime science. I have a huge passion for the ocean as well as the sky. So a bit about me and who I am. I got married at 40, and I say that because I have 6-year-old twins now. And it is often, people often say to me, how do you do it? I was very heavily pregnant at work, as you would imagine with twins. My claim to fame was I could balance my dinner plate on my bump. And my bump was called Barry and Gary for my entire pregnancy. And I have 2 daughters called Violet and Rose. I didn't have Barry and Gary in the end. I didn't know what I was having, but I didn't get Barry and Gary. And my husband is a phenomenally deep sleeper. And just before I went on maternity leave from work, we had a break-in onto the airfield where environmental protesters broke through the fence, set up a tripod, dressed as a polar bear, and placed themselves at the end of the northern runway just before the start of ops. So I took a call in the middle of the evening, got up, got dressed, came into work. I was 36 weeks pregnant. I had the girls at 37 weeks. And my husband called me and said, about 3 hours later, I've been in every room in the flat and I can't find you. I said, well, I'm not in hospital having our children. I'm at work, turn on the television. So that is an example of what my life at Heathrow is like, and I love it. But my early career started off I did a graduate programme similar to Paula, but with American International Group, AIG, in risk management. And I was very, very, very blessed. My programme was based in New York City at their head office, and my role was based in Paris. My permanent role was based in Paris. So I lived in Paris for 3.5 years, New York for a year, and I literally had the time of my life. And I look back now at that time and I think, goodness, I did not know I was living. So I have a mug that is my prized possession at home, and it says New York, Paris, London, Glasgow. So the 4 major cities that I've lived in. The reality with London, though, is I left AIG and I came to the UK to work for the first time in a professional job, to work for Virgin Atlantic in Crawley. So it wasn't quite London, it was Crawley, West Sussex. And there's nothing wrong with Crawley, West Sussex. It was just a slight step down from Paris and New York. So I moved to London and I commuted, did the reverse commute in the morning, and I've lived in southwest London since I came, and I lived with some friends I'd gone to uni with. And at Virgin, I had the time of my life. I was there for 13 years. On my 3rd day, I was named liability Leahy, because we had an emergency landing at Heathrow. On the southern runway, we brought an A340-600 in with only 300 in with only 1 landing gear down, registration GB Sky. And I remember getting the call from the building I'm sitting in now. It's the Compass Centre on the not just adjacent to the northern runway, from at the time the British Airways ops team, and saying to me, are you the new risk manager at Virgin? And I said, yes. They're like, oh, this is Heathrow ops. We're just called BA Heathrow ops. We're just calling to tell you you're about to crash land onto the runway. Just thought you should know. And I thought, good God almighty, surely this is not a call in to me. Surely somebody else important knows this. But the reason I tell you that is because the things that really motivate me at work is I love being part of a team. And when you're thrown in at the deep end, you get to be part of a team. I love people. I love being part of the team. I love working. I love a challenge. And I also love change. They're the main things that motivate me. And that's why I come to work every day with a big smile on my face. Well, most days, but I come to work with a smile on my face. So at Virgin, I did a multitude of jobs. I set up I was part of the risk management team. I joined as an assistant risk and insurance manager. I ended up heading up the risk team. I set up internal audit for the entire organisation at a time when Singapore Airlines had invested into the company. My remit spanned more than just the airline. I worked on behalf of all of the airline companies within Virgin, so Virgin America, Virgin Blue, Virgin Australia, Virgin Nigeria. I got the chance and opportunity to live in Nigeria for 6 months. I travelled the world, which was amazing, both on leisure travel and for work. I was out in Mojave to see the first launch of the Virgin Galactic mothership, and I sat next to some very, very wealthy people, and I got to meet Pam Ewing, who those of you of a certain age who remember Dallas will know who that is. So I had a phenomenal career at Virgin Atlantic, and not dissimilarly to Paula, because my preference is just to embrace change and enjoy work, and I've never not enjoyed a job that I've done. I was very comfortable at Virgin and moved around and gained a lot of breadth in my experience, and wasn't really thinking about leaving when I got contacted by a headhunter about the job that I moved to at Heathrow back in 2010. And that job was Risk and Safety Director, so my background being in risk management. I had run the safety team at Virgin, an occupational health team. I'd done all of the crisis management function as well. It seemed like a sensible move for me. I was 37 years old at the time, and I was giving up something that was very, very dear to me. But I thought, if I don't leave now, I will probably be a lifer at Virgin. And actually, the biggest thing I learned from leaving was that I probably wasn't brave before that, but I became a lot braver after the move. And I also learned that I had so many skills that I didn't realise I had, because organisations compartmentalise you into what you're good at for them. And actually, when you step outside the box and when you have that element of bravery in you, it's amazing what you realise you can do. You forget that you have skills that you didn't have. So I joined Heathrow in September 2010, and my liability Leahy enigma followed me. It snowed in 2010, as you will all remember, and the worst snowfall that we have had certainly in the last 20 years now, and the airport closed for about 3 days. And that's where I got to know Paula very well. We were both on the kind of wash-up panel for making sure that we never have an event like that provides such woeful service to passengers and airlines alike. And I really had to dig deep into my resilience reserves at that time. I can remember sitting in our boardroom, and one of my colleagues said, "I think we're getting back to normal," as I could see 6 men and shovels digging out a Cathay Pacific 747. I was like, I'm not sure that's normal, that you have 6 men with shovels digging out an aircraft like that. But actually, it was the catalyst for change, a significant change in my career, because I had been very in sort of support services with a quite technical background. And after that event, the company came to me and said, actually, we think you would be really good in operations. And I'd never worked in operations before. I had absolutely ridden sidecar with them, supported ops in Virgin, and in my initial career at Heathrow, and literally overnight I was asked to run Terminal 3, and it was the biggest privilege of my life. It is my home from home, it's where Virgin were based, and I loved absolutely every second of it. And the thing I loved about it was I loved the people. I went from having a team of about 35 very technical specialists to a team of 1,500 overnight. And people said to me, "My goodness, you have adapted so well. How come you can run this?" I'm a Kayla, so I'm a Cub Scout leader, and when you can run a Cub pack with 36 8 to 10-year-old boys, trust me, you can run anything. Literally run anything. If you can corral a mob like that, you can do pretty much anything. So from running the Terminal 3, I had the most amazing experience in that Terminal 3 at the time was filled with flag carrier airlines, and as a result of that, I was front and centre of the 2012 Olympics, because they were happening here in London. The American teams, the Turkish teams, the Russian teams, they all came through Terminal 3, and it was literally the time of our lives. It was such an amazing and uplifting and inspiring event, and I didn't think anything could get better than the Olympics until we managed the Paralympics, and that was just phenomenal. So I think if I was to sum my highlight up in terms of my Terminal 3 career, it would hands down be the Olympic Games, and how as a team in the airport everybody came together, all of the airlines, all of the partners, and we worked in unison. And it made me realise how much I really enjoyed being in ops and being in leadership and driving big projects, big programmes, and just inspiring people to kind of get on the pitch with me and basically play it out at the park. I then went on and set up the Customer Relations and Services team when we did a reorganisation, and about 4 weeks after I came back from maternity leave, having had my twins, I was asked to combine what was airside operations at the time and airport operations, and do the job that I'm in now. And when I go out and do talks at schools, people say to me, the children say to me, what do you do? And I've heard my daughters describe me as this. They say I'm the headmistress of Heathrow Airport. So I wear that badge with pride. I also describe myself as the conductor of a very large orchestra, and I'm not in control of all of the instruments. And we have some pretty poor behaviour from some of the instruments, wind instruments, strings alike, at different times of the day. And we have some exemplary behaviours as well, and some great times at the airport. But my job is effectively to make sure that every passenger, every colleague comes home and goes home safely at night to their loved ones. That is my absolutely sole reason of being here, is to make sure our operational safety is front and centre of everybody's mind. My second priority is then the operational performance of the airport and making sure that we fly as close to schedule as we possibly can. And I'm sure Ellie's had lots of experience of holds outside of Heathrow and stand challenges and air bridges not working. And my job is to make sure that the phenomenal teams that I have are on point all the time and ready to make the necessary interventions. Paula showed you the slide of, we are a mini city. It is quite incredible when you see the size and scale of the airport. But for me, just being responsible and having the privilege of the role that I have and the teams that work with me, both from internally and externally, is something that I will carry with me through the rest of my life. We've had some really difficult times at the airport, and I didn't ever think that COVID could get any more challenging after 2020, and 2021 was excruciating. But I've done so many incredible things through that period and have been blessed to be at work the whole time when so many people were not able to work and were at home or on furlough, and my job meant I was here the whole time. I've been involved in trade union negotiations during the time, doing some pretty difficult changes that we've had to do as an airport in order to protect jobs. I have been involved in the incredible Afghan repatriation that you'll have seen on the television when the government collapsed in Afghanistan, and we repatriated a huge number of souls in the biggest peacetime repatriation that has ever happened, and I still get goose pimples and tears pricking in my eyes when I think about that week. I have had to basically manage and support and cajole the teams at times of real despair. People's mental well-being has been, tested to the hill, and I take my hat off to Emma and the team for what they have done, because just making some people laugh through the darkest times has been the biggest challenge in the last 2 years. But the great thing is that I'm starting to see the green shoots of us coming out of this, and I think I want my legacy as a woman leader to be that, even through the darkest days, there can be rays of sunshine in your operational day, in your working life, and provided you feel that you are making a difference every day, then that is the motivation that certainly gets me out of bed every morning. Just to kind of finish up, I describe, probably quite selfishly given where Emma lives, but I describe Heathrow as the North Star of the world in terms of airports. I think we are in an industry that is hugely blessed to have the global reach, the diversity it has, and it's up to us as the women in industry and the men in industry to support and develop and keep growing the diversity and inclusion that we are starting to see. I've never felt like a woman in my job at Heathrow. I felt very much like a woman in my job at Virgin, because people immediately thought I was cabin crew. So it's interesting how different organisations give you different labels. So my message to everybody on the call is never take a label, be who you are, be yourself, be an authentic individual at work. You don't need to be somebody that you're not. I am very straightforward, and I have a bit of a reputation of being a nippy Scottish woman, and I will wear that badge with pride. And also for any younger colleagues who are on the call, get bred in your skills, don't chase grades, and also be easy on yourself when things don't work out. Emma said it beautifully, own your failures, but don't be too difficult on yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. You've certainly had some exciting and challenging parts of your career, but I think it just goes to show how truly varied a career in the aviation industry can have, and that's without even leaving at Heathrow Airport. I particularly enjoyed your words on being brave in your career choices and being able to step out of the box, which I think a lot of people are a little bit afraid to do. So it's really lovely to see you approach it with such enthusiasm. I must say, one of my favourite bits of hearing from each of our speakers this evening was hearing about what they wanted to do from a young age, from Catherine wanting to be a butcher, we've had Emma wanting to be an astronaut, Paula not knowing what she wanted to do. I feel I was fairly lucky. I was always wanted to be a pilot since I was very little. I remember turning up to a school assembly being the theme of what do you want to be when you're older. And my dad flew and I put on his hat and went into school with his jacket on, and all the other girls were princesses and mermaids, and I must admit even 7-year-old me can't quite believe where she's quite ended up now. So thank you for all of our speakers. We're now going to host a panel session to answer some of the questions that have been coming through. For those of you in the audience, we do encourage, please do get involved. There is a question and answers function. If you hover your mouse in the middle of the screen, you'll have a little menu pop up at the bottom with a Q&A symbol. Please do type away, and then hopefully we'll be able to get your questions answered as well. But we'll start off then. Emma, we'll come to you first. Why do you think it's so important to break the gender bias that we currently have?
Why do I think it's important to break the gender bias? Well, I think that the problem is that if if you give somebody a job based on whether they're a man or a woman, you're missing out on 50% of the talent pool. So, you know, and it doesn't actually matter whether you're talking about it being female equality or male equality, because as many men can be midwives as women can be pilots. And I think it comes down to having the right person in the job. And, you know, we just, it's not so much that we've got to fight to, you know, push men out of the way and make sure that women barge through. And I really want to sort of send that message to people when we talk about International Women's Day and things. We're celebrating the achievements of women, which is fantastic. But, you know that I couldn't have achieved anything that I have without the support of a partner. In my case, my husband, but it could be someone's husband or their wife who has supported me through the things that I have wanted to do in exactly the same way as I have supported him in his career. So it's very much about equality and not sort of just trying to push through and make women kind of a bit more prominent than men, if you like. And the only reason that there's an issue, I think, is because there's still this gender imbalance, not meanly taught in schools. But if you go into a school and talk to primary school children about their idea of what a firefighter looks like, the terminology that's used is always fireman and not firefighter. And it's the same with lots of different careers. So I think just getting at grassroots level people to understand that if I say at the age of 10 I want to be an astronaut, I never had anybody turn around to me and say you can't do that because you're a girl. I think that even at 10 I probably would have flattened somebody for saying that to me. You know, I might not be able to do that because I can't pass exams to go into space, which I never took any. But you know, the only barrier to me doing a job that I want to do is an inability to do it based on my knowledge and my ability to gain that knowledge. Being a woman doesn't make me any different from being a man in that respect. And the problem we have, I guess, as well, is that because of our biological makeup, women have to be the ones that bear children. There's always been this conception or perception, Freudian slip there, always been a perception that because a woman has to have a baby, therefore somehow she must, if you're going to take a year off work, it means you're less relevant. Absolute rubbish. I'm still just as, I mean, I had my children before I started my career, but my female colleagues who've had their children since they started flying are absolutely no less relevant and no less better pilots and no less better captains and no less better trainers, just because they happen to be the ones that, you know, are able to bear children. So it's just important that we all understand, in the same way that the colour of your skin doesn't matter when it comes to how you should be treated, neither does your gender.
Yeah, I absolutely completely agree. And particularly from a flight crew perspective, as you'll probably understand, a lot of the aircraft that we fly now are all done through the computers. The old-fashioned sort of strength of holding the aircraft together it's not gender biased at all these days, which is fantastic. We've got another question. We've got a couple of questions coming through, Paula, about the apprenticeships that you mentioned. So we've obviously got a lot of keenness for that already. Asking how they work at the moment and any more details on subjects and grades that you would need to be able to achieve, and possible what would be good at university to go for something like that, or for GCSEs.
So on the apprenticeship scheme that we run for our engineers, we just need people to have completed some GCSEs, and I'm not bothered about any grades or anything else. So just to put it out there for anybody who's done a degree, I've got a 2-2 because I partied too hard and didn't work hard enough. But actually, I think a 2-2 is a very good grade. It's a very, very good grade because it shows balance. And I want people that bring balance to our apprenticeship program and to our graduate program that can have some smarts, but also they're brilliant at getting on with people, because it's all about living our values at Heathrow. And they just want to do what Catherine was talking about, is getting things done well and trying it as hard as you can do and failing if things don't go well. So we're looking for people that are real people, not people that are working all the time and not giving time to, you know, developing relationships and meeting people and getting out there. So no grades are necessary. It's a 4-year program for the apprenticeship scheme if you join at GCSE, after GCSEs. and you go around all our different areas of engineering, so water, electrical, mechanical and civils, and you end up with a chartered engineering qualification and a job, which is really exciting. And the really good thing about doing an apprenticeship is you have a job whilst you're doing it and you get paid, so you don't have to go to university and pay back the money that it costs, which can be 40, 50, 60 grand now, depending on how long your degree is. So I would really push our engineering apprenticeship scheme. It is fantastic. Now, our degree programs, again, doesn't matter what degree you have, as long as you've got one. Doesn't matter what subjects you do, unless you want to do a finance graduate program, because clearly it helps to have a finance type of qualification. But again, we do have people on it that don't. But for the rotational graduate program, doesn't matter what degree you've had. I've had people that have done coin collection, history, I heard earlier, was a great degree. We want that. English, maths, you name it, whatever you've got, all we want is for you to have a desire to learn, an ability to really give brilliant service and to cope with different things happening every day. It's never the same day at Heathrow. Catherine described brilliantly how we go from snow to wind problems to there being a technical issue to all kinds of wonderful things, and that's what you've got to be up for.
Lovely, thank you so much for that. Catherine, we've got one coming in for you. I well remember seeing your A340-300 on the approach into Heathrow, the captain wagging his wings to try and get the undercarriage down. So you had some spotters looking there. The question is, what would be the hardest part, or what was or is the hardest part of your job?
What's the hardest part of my job? It is balancing the different priorities of the different stakeholders at the airport. So the operation, I probably shouldn't say this with Paula on the call, but the operation, you know, thankfully, through years and years of practice and lots of, you know, great people who work here, runs really well. But quite often the hardest part is to balance the needs and wants and desires of the different stakeholders. And that might sound a bit trite, but it is quite interesting, as you would imagine, the big personalities of the airlines and everything when you are trying to just make sure that the operation is running smoothly. Everybody's got different wants. I think the from a point of view of, like, if I'm in crisis mode and efficiency, one of the biggest challenges, would you believe, is the executive team and the desire for information and managing up and providing data and information when you're trying to manage a crisis. And Paula knows this, I give them that feedback after every major event to say, let me run the operation and you worry about the strategy. But we are so well drilled and trained on different events, you know, whether it's an aircraft crash event, we spend an inordinate amount of time just making sure everybody is ready and knows their role. And that is not just in, like, you know, kind of full scale exercises. That's every Friday morning we run decision gyms and we give people scenarios and we say, okay, what if this happened? And it terrorizes people. We do it with our executive team as well. So Paula is often subject to it, but my goodness, it makes people think. So probably my biggest thing is getting a weekend where I'm not dealing with something that's work related is probably the ultimate biggest challenge. But sometimes it's a good distraction, especially when the in-laws are staying.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Catherine. I must admit, flying in and out of Heathrow on a regular basis, you get to learn how much of a complex machine the whole thing is and how each of the cogs that link in with each other to make it work. It's a huge job to take on. So I must admit, we have a lot of respect for that. Emma, back to you. Thank you for your inspiring presentations, everyone. At IAG, we are very keen to raise the number of female pilots. So very interested to hear any ideas how we can best achieve this.
Well, it's interesting actually, because there was a report that was commissioned by the Royal Aeronautical Society that was released on Monday into why it's actually to do with why there are not many or so few female trainers in flying. And some of the comments that came from that anonymous survey were frankly shocking. So I think the first thing is to foster an environment where women are not treated differently. And it doesn't matter how much people in airlines say that that's the case. And certainly in my airline, absolutely, I would say, you know, I was a number on a crew list. I was certainly never treated differently by my colleagues or crewing or anyone else because I happened to be a woman. But, you know, that's not the case for everybody. And there have been lots of really unfortunate stories that have come out of that study talking about sexual discrimination and just unwelcome predatory behaviour towards women. It's not okay. It needs to be stamped out, and it needs to come from the top down. It has to change. The whole environment has to change. But in terms of encouraging women into aviation, I mean, definitely for me, working for EasyJet was a no-brainer because I came home every night. So the fact that my children were 600 miles away in boarding school was not the airline's fault, you know. But you can have a family if you come home every night, and that's not how all airlines operate. But I know lots of women who also very successfully have long haul careers or work on IAG fleets as well. So I think just making it an open and welcoming environment, you've got to go into, I really think it has to start with going into schools and telling girls that they can be pilots. A lot of girls don't even know that they can. They don't understand that. And they don't understand either that you don't have to be science and maths orientated to be a pilot. I'm definitely not. I'm an artist and a linguist, just like Catherine. And actually, most of my colleagues are really, really creative rather than really, really sciencey and techie. So, you know, just it's already an environment that's fantastic to work in. We need to show more women, you know, the idea of you can't be what you can't see. I don't entirely agree with that because it leaves no room for imagination, but we just need to see more women doing the jobs that they're doing. Ryanair released a great video the other day talking about their operation being, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are lots of men that work in those roles in Ryanair as well, but they put together a video showing women working in every single department, from baggage handling to engineering to the flight deck to cabin crew, and just busting this myth that women are cabin crew and cabin crew only. And I've got a lot of awesome friends who work for BA and in the IAG group, and just keep spreading that message. They do a lot of work for you already by going into schools and doing that, you know, on your behalf, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to be able to go out there and show the public from a young age that it is definitely a possibility for women to get into these sorts of careers. I was really lucky this week. I've just had a little European tour with work, and it was the first time we had an entirely female crew. Both the captain and myself were female. We had all female cabin crew. And to walk through a terminal, it's quite amusing to see people's faces change because people aren't necessarily used to seeing all female crew. I think there's still quite a stigma on assuming generally that the pilot's going to be male. And it's lovely seeing such positivity and enthusiasm towards a bit of girl power, essentially, going into the job. So hopefully we'll be able to change quite a lot of that.
We used to call it unmanned flight on those days. I used to do my welcome on board PAs and say welcome on board this unmanned flight because there were no men operating on board. And there's just one other part to that answer, if you don't mind me sort of just continuing it actually, which is the cost of training is prohibitive to a lot of people, whether they're male or female. But actually, if you're one half of a partnership and you're having to spend £120,000 to get into the right hand seat of an aircraft, and you've also got a family to raise, that is prohibitive, and it's going to become more and more difficult to overcome that challenge. There's a reported need for 800,000 pilots in Europe over the next 10 years, and I don't know where they're going to come from at with the training costs as they are. So That's something that, you know, the sponsorships. I had a place on a BA cadetship in 1995 down in Glasgow, in Prestwick, which I turned down because it was too far away from my new husband. But you know, cadetships, I think, need to make a comeback.
They certainly do. I was very grateful to be on the FPP about 7 years ago now, and it was a fantastic opportunity that certainly opened the doors to myself and a lot of my colleagues who wouldn't have otherwise been able to get into the airline industry. So coming on, we've spoken a little bit about having families, etc., etc. Paula, how have you managed to balance motherhood with such an impressive career within Heathrow?
I've always found that I've been given great flexibility by the people I've worked for at Heathrow. So I had my 2 girls when I joined Heathrow, and I was always very able to leave early, go and collect them from nursery, and to make sure that I could fit them around, you know, what worked for me, both at home and at work. So really, really good support helps immensely in terms of being able to make it work. But you do feel, and I've obviously got 2 other mothers with me today, you do sometimes feel that you're not getting anything right, because it's hard work raising a family and also coming into work. So there's always that kind of like tension on you, on am I doing enough for work and also for my family. But having a really good partner who plays their share. So we were always lucky that my partner would take in the mornings and I would collect in the evenings, and that kind of like division of duties really does help. And then having a really good network of friends and family that can step in as well does help. But it can be done, and I'm actually seeing now more and more men wanting to take an active role in terms of taking time out in terms of paternity leave and shared paternity leave, and actually taking, you know, a year off or further time off to support families. So, you know, I think we need to not have gender bias too around making families work for women. It's the same for men now, and men are definitely taking a more active role. So I think it can be done, but you've got to have a really good workplace that is supportive and help you be flexible.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. I think the shared responsibility certainly is the way forward. It's modern times, and it's nice to see so many women who are able to hold careers as well. And Catherine, come to you for the final question. What is the most important piece of advice that you've ever been given?
It was actually a Shonda Rhimes quote, would you believe? And Shonda Rhimes, for those of you who don't know, is the woman who is behind the phenomenal Bridgerton series and a huge amount of films and movies. And I got a 2-2 at university. I'm so glad that I'm on a panel with very similar accolades, and I carried that with me as a bit of a burden over my career, that actually that's terrible, it wasn't good enough, and I was quite embarrassed to admit it for a long time. Lots of very clever boy clubs, and I am married to an Oxbridge graduate who is a geographer but doesn't know his capital cities, so that is an ongoing an ongoing joke between us. But let me just tell you this this quote, and this is the best part of advice I've ever been given, but it's absolutely attributed to Shonda Rhimes. It's: lucky implies that I was handed something I did not earn, that I did not work hard for. I am not lucky. You know what I am? I am smart, I am talented, I take advantage of the opportunities that come my way, and I work really, really hard. Don't call me lucky, call me a badass. And that is the best bit of advice. And I wrote it down in my book to make sure that I remember that, because I often say I'm really lucky, I was, very lucky to get this job. And it's my brother-in-law who said, "You're not lucky, Catherine, you have worked really hard your whole life for this."
That is wonderful. What a lovely quote. I've not heard that one before, but for those that can't see, or the presenters, everybody was nodding and clapping, and I think it's something that certainly sticks with a lot of people going into a career like this. So we'll take that one on board, certainly, and hopefully add it to my own collection. And on that note, that question will conclude tonight's webinar. On behalf of the RAeS Heathrow Branch, I would like to thank all our speakers in tonight's session. It was wonderful to hear how each of you portrayed your stories, and it certainly makes me proud to be a woman in such a forward-thinking, fast-paced industry. I'm sure that the next generation of women will be inspired by your words, and it has hopefully opened a door for those who hadn't previously considered a career in aviation. Thank you also to everybody in our audience. We hope you enjoyed the webinar and look forward to welcoming you to another Heathrow Branch lecture in the future. Please do follow, connect, like us on social media channels and keep in contact with the branch. All the details should be on your screen now. I do see there are loads of questions that are still coming through. Apologies that we haven't managed to get through them all, but thank you all for joining us and hope you have a lovely evening. Good night, everybody.